The gunshot echoed across the canyon just as Samuel Quinn's horse stumbled on the rocky trail. And in that moment, he knew someone was in serious trouble up ahead in the New Mexico Territory wilderness. Samuel had been riding for 3 days straight from Santa Fe, heading toward San Andreas with a delivery of medical supplies for the town's new doctor. The year was 1876, and the territory was still wild enough that a man traveling alone needed to keep his wits sharp and his rifle within reach. He was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that fell past his collar. His father had been a rancher before Comanche raiders killed him when Samuel was just 15, leaving him to fend for himself in a world that showed no mercy to the unprepared. The sound of that gunshot made his blood run cold. It was not the crack of a hunter's rifle bringing down game, but something more desperate, more final. Samuel urged his horse forward, guiding the chestnut mare carefully around the loose stones that littered the narrow path. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the red rock formations in deeper shades of crimson and gold. As he rounded a bend in the trail, Samuel heard something that made him pull his horse to a stop. A voice, soft and feminine, speaking words he could barely make out. He dismounted quietly, tying his horse to a scrubby juniper tree, and moved forward on foot with his rifle in hand. The voice grew clearer as he approached, and he realized with a shock that it was a woman praying. Samuel crept closer, using the natural cover of boulders and brush to conceal his approach. What he saw made his jaw tighten with anger. A covered wagon sat tilted at an awkward angle in a small clearing, one wheel clearly broken. 2 bodies lay motionless on the ground near the wagon, a man and a woman, both older, both clearly dead from gunshot wounds. The horses that had pulled the wagon were gone, along with whatever valuables had been inside. Crouched behind the wagon, partially hidden by its shadow, was a young woman in a dirt-stained calico dress. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins and hung in waves around her face. Her hands were clasped together, her eyes closed, and her lips moved in whispered prayer. Samuel could see dried blood on her sleeve and a nasty bruise forming on her cheek. He watched for a moment, scanning the area for any sign of the raiders who had done this. The tracks suggested 3 or 4 men on horseback, heading north, probably several hours old. They would not be coming back. Samuel stepped out from behind his cover, deliberately making enough noise that he would not startle her too badly. The woman's eyes flew open, and she scrambled backward against the wagon wheel, terror written across her face. She looked to be in her early 20s, with green eyes that were red from crying and fear. Samuel immediately raised his free hand in a gesture of peace, keeping his rifle pointed at the ground. "Madam, I mean you no harm," he said gently. "I heard the trouble and came to help." She stared at him for a long moment, her breathing rapid and shallow. Her gaze darted to the bodies on the ground, then back to him, as if she could not quite believe he was real. Slowly, she lowered her hands from the defensive position she had raised them to. "I did not think anyone would come," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I have been praying for hours, and I did not think anyone would come." Samuel set his rifle down carefully and approached her slowly, as he would a frightened animal. "You are safe now." "I am Samuel Quinn, heading to San Andreas. What happened here?" The woman's composure crumbled and tears began streaming down her face. "Raiders came at dawn, 4 of them. My uncle and aunt, they tried to fight back. The men took everything, the horses, our supplies, the money we had saved. They shot them both and left me here. They said no one travels this trail, that I would die here alone." Samuel knelt beside her, close enough to offer comfort but not so close as to frighten her further. "They were wrong. "You are going to be all right. Can you tell me your name?" "Victoria." "Victoria Andrews." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, smearing dirt across her cheek. "We were traveling from Missouri to California. My parents died last year from fever, and my uncle and aunt were all the family I had left. Now I have no one." The desolation in her voice cut through Samuel like a knife. He knew what it meant to lose family, to be left alone in a harsh world. He reached out slowly and touched her shoulder. "You are not alone anymore. I give you my word that I will see you safe." Victoria looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her because some of the tension left her shoulders. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Samuel said simply. "And because I know what it is like to have nowhere to turn." He stood and offered her his hand. "Can you walk? Are you injured beyond what I can see?" She took his hand, her fingers cold despite the warmth of the day, and let him help her to her feet. "My ankle is twisted, and I have cuts and bruises, but nothing broken, I think. They pushed me when they came to the wagon, and I fell hard." Samuel supported her weight as she tested her ankle, wincing at the pain. "We need to bury your family before nightfall, and then we need to get away from this place. Raiders sometimes circle back, and I would rather not be here if they do." Victoria nodded, fresh tears spilling over at the mention of burial. "I could not do it alone. I tried, but the ground is too hard and I am not strong enough." "I will take care of it," Samuel assured her. He helped her sit on a flat rock in the shade, then retrieved his horse and the small shovel he kept strapped to his saddle. The next 2 hours were grim work, digging graves in the rocky soil while Victoria sat in silence, occasionally praying or crying quietly. Samuel worked steadily, removing his shirt in the heat, his muscles straining with the effort. When it was done, they stood together over the graves. Victoria spoke a few halting words about her Uncle Thomas and Aunt Margaret, about their kindness and their dreams of a new life in California. Samuel bowed his head respectfully, adding his own silent prayer for the dead. As the sun touched the western horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, they turned away from the graves and focused on survival. "We cannot stay here tonight," Samuel said, scanning the darkening sky. "There is a place about 2 hours' ride from here, a sheltered area with water. We can make camp there safely." Victoria looked at the broken wagon, at the scattered remains of her family's possessions. "I have nothing left. They took everything of value." Samuel went to the wagon and searched through what the raiders had left behind. He found a blanket, a dented cooking pot, a few pieces of clothing, and a leather-bound book that turned out to be a Bible with family names written inside. He gathered these items and brought them to Victoria. "You have your life, and you have your memories," he said gently. "Everything else can be replaced in time." She took the Bible and held it to her chest, closing her eyes. "This was my mother's. It is the only thing I have left of my family now." Samuel gave her a moment, then said, "We need to go. Can you ride?" "My horse is strong enough to carry us both for a few hours." Victoria nodded, tucking the Bible into a small bag Samuel fashioned from the blanket. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, keeping one arm around her waist to steady her. She was stiff at first, uncomfortable with the closeness of a stranger, but as the horse began to move and the darkness deepened around them, she gradually relaxed against him. They rode in silence through the canyon, following a trail that Samuel knew from previous journeys. The moon rose full and bright, lighting their way. Victoria shivered in the cooling night air, and Samuel shifted his position to shield her from the wind as much as possible. He could feel her exhaustion in the way she sagged against him, but she never complained or asked to stop. When they reached the sheltered hollow Samuel had mentioned, He helped Victoria down from the horse and settled her on a smooth patch of ground near a small spring. He quickly gathered wood and built a fire, the flames pushing back the darkness and bringing warmth to the little hollow. He had dried meat and hardtack in his saddlebags, along with coffee and a tin cup. It was not much, but it was food, and Victoria ate hungrily despite her grief. "Thank you," she said quietly as she finished eating. The firelight played across her features, softening the fear and exhaustion. "I do not know how to repay your kindness." Samuel poured coffee into the tin cup and handed it to her. "You do not owe me anything. I'm just glad I came along when I did." Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm cup and stared into the fire. "What will happen to me now?" "I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. My uncle's claim in California is worthless without him to file it." "You can come with me to San Andreas," Samuel said. "It is a small town, but it is growing. There are good people there who will help you get on your feet. The doctor I am bringing supplies to, he and his wife might need help. Or there is a boarding house run by a kind widow who could use an extra pair of hands. You would take me there, a stranger who is nothing but a burden to you." Samuel looked at her across the fire, at the vulnerability and hope warring in her expression. "You are not a burden, and you will not be a stranger for long if we are traveling together." He smiled slightly. "Besides, the trail to San Andreas is lonely. I would welcome the company." For the first time since he had found her, Victoria smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it transformed her face, hinting at the beauty that sorrow and fear had temporarily eclipsed. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Quinn. I will try not to slow you down too much. Call me Samuel. And we will take whatever time we need. There is no rush." He stood and spread out his bedroll near the fire, then laid the blanket from the wagon beside it. "You take the bedroll. I will keep watch for a while and sleep later." Victoria started to protest, but Samuel waved her objections away. She settled onto the bedroll with a grateful sigh, pulling the blanket over herself. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep sleep. Samuel sat with his back against a rock, his rifle across his knees, watching the fire and listening to the night sounds of the wilderness. As he kept his vigil, Samuel found his thoughts returning to Victoria again and again. There was something about her that called to him, something beyond just the natural compassion any decent person would feel for someone in her situation. She had courage, he could see that. Despite everything she had endured, she had not fallen apart completely. She had prayed for rescue but had not given up. There was strength in her, the kind of strength a person needed to survive in this territory. The night passed slowly. Samuel dozed occasionally but never deeply, always alert for danger. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, he built up the fire and put coffee on to boil. The smell of it woke Victoria, who sat up slowly, wincing at her various aches and pains. "Good morning," Samuel said, handing her the coffee. "How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by horses," Victoria admitted, accepting the cup. "But alive, thanks to you." She looked around at the peaceful hollow, at the spring bubbling nearby, at the soft morning light filtering through the rocks. "I thought yesterday that I would never see another sunrise. I was certain I would die in that canyon." "But you did not," Samuel said firmly. "You survived and you will keep surviving. You are stronger than you know." Victoria met his eyes and something passed between them in that moment, a connection that neither of them could have explained. She looked away first, her cheeks flushing slightly. "We should go soon, should we not? You said San Andreas is still several days away." 2 days if we push, 3 if we take it easy," Samuel confirmed. "With your ankle, we should probably take 3. There is no point in causing more injury." They broke camp efficiently, Samuel packing his gear while Victoria tidied herself as best she could with water from the spring. Her ankle was swollen but bearable, she reported, and she could walk on it if she was careful. Samuel helped her onto the horse again, and they set out as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The landscape changed as they traveled, the red rock canyons giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and piñon pine. They stopped frequently to rest the horse and to give Victoria's ankle a break from the strain of riding. During these stops, they talked, sharing pieces of their lives with each other. Samuel learned that Victoria had grown up in a small town in Missouri, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. She could read and write, which was more than many women on the frontier could claim, and she had a quick mind and a dry sense of humor that emerged as she grew more comfortable with him. She had been engaged once, to a young man who died in the war, and she had never seriously considered another suitor. "I think part of me closed off after James died," she admitted as they sat in the shade of a large cottonwood tree, sharing dried fruit from Samuel's supplies. "I could not imagine loving someone else, could not imagine going through that pain again if I lost them." "I understand that," Samuel said. "After I lost my father, I kept everyone at a distance for a long time. It seemed safer not to care too much about anyone. But you changed your mind." Samuel shrugged. "Not exactly. I just realized that being alone was its own kind of death. Better to risk the pain and have something real than to live a half-life, always holding back." Victoria considered this, plucking at the grass beside her. "You are a wise man, Samuel Quinn." "Not wise enough to avoid getting shot at by Apaches last year, or smart enough to turn down a cargo job that paid half what it should have," Samuel said with a laugh. "But I am learning." They rode on, the easy conversation continuing. Victoria told him about the books she had read, about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday, about her skill with a needle that her mother had taught her. Samuel shared stories of his travels across the territory, of the people he had met, and the places he had seen. He told her about San Andreas, about the marshal who kept the peace with a fair but firm hand, about the church with a bell that could be heard for miles, about the general store run by a couple from Germany who made the best bread west of the Mississippi. "It sounds like a good place," Victoria said wistfully. "A place where a person could build a life." "It is," Samuel agreed. "It is not perfect, nowhere is, but it is as close to a real community as you will find out here. People look after each other." That night they camped near a creek, the sound of running water a peaceful backdrop to their simple meal. Samuel caught 2 fish from the creek, and Victoria surprised him by expertly cleaning and cooking them over the fire. "My uncle taught me," she explained when she saw his raised eyebrows. "He said a person should know how to fend for themselves, woman or man." "Your uncle was a smart man," Samuel said, savoring the perfectly cooked fish. "I am sorry you lost him." Victoria's eyes grew sad. "Me too. He and my aunt were good people. They did not deserve what happened to them." "No, they did not," Samuel agreed quietly. They fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Later, as Victoria settled into the bedroll and Samuel took his usual position keeping watch, he found himself thinking about the future in a way he had not done in years. Before, the future had been a vague thing, a series of jobs and journeys with no particular destination. Now, with Victoria's presence, he found himself wondering about possibilities he had long since dismissed as not meant for him. The next day brought them within sight of San Andreas. The town sat in a valley between rolling hills, protected from the worst of the wind and weather. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from a distance they could hear the sounds of activity. Hammers on anvils, dogs barking, children playing. It looked peaceful and welcoming, and Samuel felt a surge of satisfaction at bringing Victoria to safety. "There it is," he said, pointing. "San Andreas. Victoria shaded her eyes and looked where he indicated. It is bigger than I expected. About 200 people now, I would guess. Growing every month as more settlers come through. Samuel guided the horse down the slope toward the town. We will go to the boarding house first and get you settled. Mrs. Callahan, the woman who runs it, she is tough but kind. She will help you. As they rode into town, people looked up with curiosity at the sight of Samuel with a woman riding in front of him. He nodded to those he knew, making his way down the main street to a large 2-story house painted white with green shutters. Before they could dismount, a stout woman with gray hair and sharp blue eyes emerged from the front door. "Samuel Quinn, is that you?" she called. "And who is this you have brought with you?" Samuel helped Victoria down from the horse, keeping a supporting hand on her elbow as she favored her injured ankle. "Mrs. Callahan, this is Victoria Andrews. She ran into trouble on the trail. Her family was killed by raiders and she needs a safe place to stay." Mrs. Callahan's expression shifted from curiosity to compassion in an instant. She came down the steps and took Victoria's hands in her own. "You poor dear. Come inside right now. I have a room available and you look like you could use a proper meal and a hot bath." "I do not have money," Victoria said quickly. "I cannot pay you right now, but if you could give me work, I will earn my keep." "We will worry about that later," Mrs. Callahan said firmly. "Right now you need care. Samuel, bring her things inside. I will take care of this young woman." Samuel retrieved the small bundle of Victoria's belongings and followed the two women into the boarding house. The interior was clean and comfortable, with simple but well-made furniture and curtains at the windows. Mrs. Callahan led Victoria up the stairs to a small room at the back of the house, talking the whole time about the town and its residents. "You just rest now, dear," Mrs. Callahan said, settling Victoria onto the bed. "I will bring up some water for washing and something to eat. Samuel, you come back downstairs and tell me what happened." In the kitchen, over coffee that Mrs. Callahan insisted on serving with fresh bread and butter, Samuel related the story of finding Victoria in the canyon. Mrs. Callahan listened with a grave expression, shaking her head at the violence and cruelty of the raiders. "Those poor people," she said. "And that poor girl left alone like that. She is lucky you came along when you did, Samuel." "I am glad I could help," Samuel said. "I told her you might have work for her, if she wants to stay in San Andreas." Mrs. Callahan nodded thoughtfully. "I could use help with the cooking and cleaning, truth be told. My arthritis has been bothering me more this year, and she seems like a capable young woman." "Yes, I think we can work something out." Samuel finished his coffee and stood to leave. "I need to deliver these medical supplies to Dr. Harrison, and then I have to head back out. I am supposed to pick up a load of goods in Santa Fe next week." "You are leaving so soon, Mrs. Callahan asked, a knowing look in her eyes. "I thought perhaps you might want to stay around for a few days, make sure Miss Andrews is settled properly." Samuel felt his neck heat with embarrassment. "I am sure she will be fine in your care, Mrs. Callahan." "I am sure she will," the older woman agreed. "But I also saw the way you looked at her, Samuel Quinn, and the way she looked at you. Do not be in such a hurry to ride away from something good." Samuel did not know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded and headed for the door. As he stepped outside, he glanced up at the second floor, wondering which window was Victoria's room. He shook his head at his own foolishness. He had known the woman for barely 3 days. It was ridiculous to feel this pull toward her, this reluctance to leave. But as he delivered the medical supplies and went about his business in town, Samuel could not stop thinking about Victoria. He found himself making excuses to stay in San Andreas another day, telling himself he needed to check on his horse, to repair a piece of tack, to have a proper meal at the restaurant. In truth, he wanted to see Victoria again, to make sure she was truly all right. The next morning, he returned to the boarding house, telling himself he was just being polite. Mrs. Callahan answered the door with a smile that suggested she had been expecting him. "She is in the kitchen, helping with breakfast," Mrs. Callahan said. "Go on back." Samuel found Victoria standing at the stove, stirring a pot of porridge. She had bathed and changed into a clean dress that Mrs. Callahan must have lent her. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and the bruise on her cheek was already starting to fade. She looked up when he entered, and her face lit up with a smile that made his heart skip. "Samuel, I did not expect to see you again so soon. Mrs. Callahan said you were leaving town." "I am leaving tomorrow," Samuel said. "I just wanted to make sure you were settled in all right." "I am more than all right," Victoria assured him. "Mrs. Callahan has been wonderful. She is letting me work here in exchange for room and board. I will be able to save money and figure out what I want to do next." They stood looking at each other for a long moment, neither quite knowing what to say. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat. "I am glad. You deserve some peace after what you went through." "Thanks to you," Victoria said softly. "I owe you my life, Samuel Quinn." "You do not owe me anything," Samuel repeated as he had before. "I am just glad I could help, Mrs. Callahan bustled in then, breaking the tension. "Samuel, since you are here, why do you not stay for breakfast? Victoria has made the porridge and I have bacon and eggs on the way." Samuel agreed, and they all sat down together at the kitchen table. The meal was simple but delicious, and the conversation flowed easily. Other boarders came and went, nodding to Samuel and welcoming Victoria with friendly smiles. It felt domestic and comfortable in a way that Samuel was not used to, and he found himself reluctant to leave when the meal was over. "Walk with me?" Victoria asked as he prepared to go. "Just around town. I have not really seen much of it yet, and my ankle is much better today." They strolled down the main street together, Samuel pointing out the various businesses and buildings. He introduced Victoria to the people they met, and everyone was welcoming, offering sympathy for her loss and congratulations on her survival. At the general store, the German couple Mrs. Callahan had mentioned made a fuss over Victoria, pressing a loaf of fresh bread into her hands and refusing to accept payment. "This is a good town," Victoria said as they walked toward the church at the edge of town. "I can see why you spoke of it so fondly." "It has its share of problems like anywhere," Samuel said. "But yes, it is a good place. A place where a person can make a fresh start if they need one." They reached the church, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower and a small cemetery beside it. Victoria grew quiet, looking at the graves, and Samuel knew she was thinking of her uncle and aunt, buried in an unmarked spot in the canyon. "I should have brought stones for their graves," she said. "Something to mark the place." "We can do that," Samuel said impulsively. "I can take you back there before I leave for Santa Fe. We can bring proper markers and say a few more words over them, give you some closure." Victoria turned to him with tears in her eyes. "You would do that, even though it would take you out of your way." "It is important," Samuel said simply. "And yes, I would do that for you." They made the journey the next day, setting out at dawn with 2 wooden crosses that the town carpenter had made overnight. The ride back to the canyon was difficult for Victoria, bringing back painful memories, but she was resolute. They placed the crosses at the head of each grave, and Victoria spoke at length about her uncle and aunt, about their lives and their love for each other and for her. Samuel stood with his hat in his hands, listening to her words, adding his own prayer for the departed. When it was done, Victoria turned to him and embraced him suddenly, burying her face in his shoulder. Samuel held her as she cried, his arms coming around her naturally, protectively. He rested his cheek against her hair and closed his eyes, feeling the rightness of this moment, of this connection between them. "Thank you," Victoria whispered against his shirt. "Thank you for everything, Samuel. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." "You do not need to repay me," Samuel said gently. He pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. These past few days with you, they have meant more to me than I know how to say. I know the timing is terrible and you have been through so much, but I cannot leave without you knowing that I care about you. More than I should, given how short a time we have known each other." Victoria's eyes widened, and fresh tears spilled over, but these were different. "Oh, Samuel, I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I thought I was being foolish, attaching myself to the first person who showed me kindness. But it is more than that, is it not? What I feel when I am with you, it is more than gratitude." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "It is more than gratitude. At least it is for me. Victoria, I know this is fast, and I know you need time to grieve and heal, but I would like to court you properly if you will let me. I would like to see where this connection between us might lead." "Yes," Victoria said, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, Samuel, I would like that very much." They sealed their understanding with a gentle kiss, tender and sweet, full of promise for the future. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, the shadows of grief lifted slightly by the light of this new beginning. The ride back to San Andreas felt different, charged with a new energy. They talked about their hopes and dreams, about what they wanted from life. Samuel admitted that he had been drifting for years, taking odd jobs and never settling anywhere because he had not found a reason to stop moving. Victoria confessed that she had felt lost since her parents died, following her uncle and aunt because she had nowhere else to go, no purpose of her own. "Maybe we can help each other find purpose," Samuel suggested. "Maybe we can build something together." "I would like that," Victoria said. "I would like that very much." When they reached San Andreas, the whole town seemed to sense the change in their relationship. Mrs. Callahan took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "About time you two figured it out," she said. "I could see it from the moment you rode into town together." Over the following weeks, Samuel found reasons to stay in San Andreas rather than taking jobs that would keep him away for long stretches. He took work at the local stable, helping to break and train horses. It paid less than his usual work, but it kept him close to Victoria, and that was what mattered most to him. He visited her every day at the boarding house, and they spent their free time together, walking, talking, learning each other's hearts. Victoria thrived in San Andreas. She proved to be an excellent cook and housekeeper, and Mrs. Callahan came to rely on her more and more. The older woman's arthritis did trouble her, as she had mentioned, and Victoria gradually took over many of the daily tasks of running the boarding house. She also began using her sewing skills to take in mending and alterations, building a small income of her own. As summer turned to autumn, Samuel and Victoria's relationship deepened. They were seen together so often that the town simply accepted them as a couple. The marshal's wife invited them to Sunday dinners. The doctor and his wife, a kind couple in their 40s, took them under their wing, treating them almost like children of their own. The church congregation welcomed Victoria warmly, and she became involved in the Ladies' Charitable Society, helping to organize food and clothing drives for families in need. One evening in late October, as they sat together on the porch of the boarding house watching the sunset, Samuel took Victoria's hand in his. "I have been thinking about the future," he said, "about what I want my life to look like." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "And what have you decided?" "I want to stop wandering. I want to put down roots here in San Andreas. I have been talking to Mr. Henderson about buying some land on the edge of town, about building a house and starting a proper horse breeding and training business. The territory needs good horses, and I am good at that work." "That sounds wonderful," Victoria said. "A perfect plan for you." Samuel turned to face her, his expression serious. "It is not just for me. Victoria, these months with you have been the happiest of my life. You make me want to be better, to do better. You make me want to build a future instead of just surviving day to day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we have not been courting for very long by traditional standards, but out here, time moves differently. We have been through more together than many couples experience in years. Victoria Andrews, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond set in it. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Victoria gasped, her hand going to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she breathed. "Oh yes, Samuel, yes." Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. From inside the boarding house, they heard Mrs. Callahan let out a whoop of joy, followed by her shouting to the other boarders that there was going to be a wedding. The next months passed in a flurry of activity. Samuel worked with Mr. Henderson to finalize the land purchase and began building a house with help from men in the town. It was not large, but it was solid and well made, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and a wide front porch. Victoria spent her free time sewing curtains and quilts, preparing to make the house a home. They were married on a bright December morning in the church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Victoria wore a dress she had sewn herself from cream-colored silk that Mrs. Callahan had ordered special from Santa Fe as a wedding gift. Samuel wore a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face shining with happiness. The pastor, a kindly man in his 60s, led them through their vows, and when Samuel kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the boarding house, with tables set up in the large dining room and spilling out onto the porch. People brought food and gifts, and there was music and dancing late into the night. Samuel and Victoria moved through the celebration hand in hand, accepting congratulations and well wishes from their friends and neighbors. As the evening wound down, Samuel and Victoria slipped away to their new home. Samuel carried Victoria over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. Inside, a fire was already burning in the hearth, courtesy of Mrs. Callahan, and candles cast a warm glow over the simple furniture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn," Samuel said, setting Victoria on her feet. Victoria looked around at the house they would share, at the life they were beginning together. "It is perfect," she said. "Everything is absolutely perfect." That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Victoria traced patterns on Samuel's chest with her finger. "Do you remember that day in the canyon when you first found me?" "Every moment of it," Samuel confirmed. "I was praying for a miracle, for someone to save me. But you were more than that. You did not just save my life, Samuel. You gave me a reason to want to live again. You gave me hope and love and a future I thought I had lost forever." Samuel pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "You did the same for me. I was just going through the motions before I met you, existing but not really living. You changed everything, Victoria. You made me want more from life than just the next job, the next trail. You made me want a home and a family and all the things I thought were not meant for someone like me." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the future stretching out before them full of promise and possibility. The first year of their marriage was a time of growth and building. Samuel's horse training business prospered as word spread about his skill and fair dealing. Ranchers from across the territory brought their horses to him, and he developed a reputation for being able to work with even the most difficult animals. Victoria continued her sewing work and the boarding house arrangement with Mrs. Callahan evolved into a partnership of sorts, with Victoria helping to manage things while Mrs. Callahan gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations. In the spring, Victoria discovered she was with child. Samuel was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and attentive in a way that Victoria found both endearing and occasionally stifling. He worried about her constantly, insisting she not overwork herself, making sure she had everything she needed. "I am not made of glass," Victoria laughed one afternoon when Samuel rushed to carry a basket of laundry she had been managing just fine on her own. "Women have babies every day. I will be all right." "I know," Samuel said, setting down the basket, "but you are my wife and this is our child. I want everything to be perfect for you both." Victoria softened at his earnest expression. "It already is perfect. We have each other, we have our home, we have this community. Our baby will be born surrounded by love. What more could anyone ask for?" The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as Victoria's belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent evenings discussing names and making plans for the future. Samuel built a cradle with his own hands, carving delicate designs into the wood. Victoria sewed tiny clothes and blankets, preparing for the arrival of their first child. On a warm day in early November, just over a year after they had met in that canyon, Victoria went into labor. Samuel fetched Dr. Harrison and Mrs. Callahan, then paced anxiously in the parlor as the women helped Victoria through the birth. The hours seemed to stretch endlessly, each of Victoria's cries of pain cutting through Samuel like a knife. He had faced down angry bulls, wild horses, and dangerous men without flinching, but listening to his wife in pain nearly unmanned him. Finally, as the sun was setting, a different sound filled the house, the strong, lusty cry of a newborn baby. Dr. Harrison emerged from the bedroom with a smile on his face. "Congratulations, Samuel. You have a healthy son." Samuel rushed into the bedroom to find Victoria propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. She looked up as he entered, her face glowing with love and pride. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Samuel approached almost fearfully, overcome by the magnitude of the moment. Victoria pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny face with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were trying to focus on the world around him. Samuel reached out with one finger to touch the baby's small hand, and the tiny fingers immediately wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered, tears streaming down his face without shame. "Victoria, he is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Victoria asked. They had discussed many names over the months, but standing there with their son in Victoria's arms, Samuel knew what felt right. "I would like to name him Thomas after your uncle, the man who helped raise you, who tried to keep you safe. Our son should carry that name forward." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Quinn. Yes, that is exactly right. Uncle Thomas would have been so proud to have a namesake." Mrs. Callahan and Dr. Harrison left them alone to bond as a family. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Victoria, both of them watching their son with wonder and awe. Thomas slept peacefully, unaware of the love that surrounded him, of the journey his parents had taken to reach this moment. "Thank you," Samuel said to Victoria. "Thank you for this gift, for our son, for our life together." "We made him together," Victoria reminded him with a tired smile. "All of this we built together." As Thomas grew from an infant into a toddler, the Quinn household was filled with joy and laughter. Samuel was a devoted father, often carrying his son on his shoulders as he worked with the horses or taking him for rides around the property. Victoria delighted in every milestone: the first smile, the first word, the first wobbly steps. The boarding house essentially became Thomas's second home, with Mrs. Callahan and the other boarders doting on him shamelessly. When Thomas was 2 years old, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder. She was more tired, more uncomfortable, and there were times when Dr. Harrison worried. But Victoria was strong, and in the spring of 1880 she gave birth to twins, a girl and another boy. The girl they named Rose, after Samuel's mother, and the boy they named Matthew, a name they both simply liked. Samuel found himself the father of 3 children under the age of 3, and his life became a beautiful chaos of diapers, midnight feedings, and endless love. The house seemed too small now, so he built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. Victoria, despite being exhausted most of the time, glowed with happiness. This was the family she had dreamed of, the life she had hoped for during those dark hours in the canyon. The years passed in a pleasant blur. Thomas grew into a thoughtful, quiet boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. He loved the horses and spent hours following Samuel around, learning the business. Rose was her mother's daughter, quick and clever, always with a book in her hand once she learned to read. Matthew was the wild one, fearless and adventurous, keeping his parents on their toes with his antics. By 1885, when the children were old enough to be reasonably self-sufficient, Victoria had established herself as one of the most respected seamstresses in the territory. Women came from miles around for her beautiful work, and she employed 2 young women from town to help with the demand. Samuel's horse operation had expanded to include a breeding program, and his horses were sought after across New Mexico territory and beyond. One evening, as they sat on their front porch watching their children play in the yard, Victoria leaned against Samuel's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about that day in the canyon, about how different our lives might have been if you had taken a different trail?" "I think about it often," Samuel admitted. "I think about how close I came to never finding you, to living my whole life and never knowing what I was missing. Sometimes it still amazes me that everything worked out the way it did." "I do not think it was chance," Victoria said thoughtfully. "I think we were meant to find each other. I prayed for rescue that day, and God sent me exactly what I needed. Not just someone to save my life, but someone to share it with." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Then I am grateful for whatever force brought us together. My life truly began the day I found you, Victoria." As the years continued to pass, the Quinn family became an integral part of San Andreas. Samuel served as a town councilman for several years, helping to guide the community's growth. Victoria was active in the church and the school board, ensuring that all children in the area had access to education. Their children grew up strong and healthy, surrounded by love and community. Thomas, at 18, took over much of the day-to-day operation of the horse business, showing a natural talent that exceeded even his father's. Rose, at 16, was planning to attend a teacher's college in Santa Fe, determined to bring better education to the territory. Matthew, also 16, was torn between following his brother into the horse business and pursuing his interest in the law, inspired by spending time with the town's lawyer. In 1895, as Samuel and Victoria celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary, they found themselves alone in their house for the first time in years. Thomas was away delivering horses to a ranch in Colorado. Rose was already at college. Matthew was staying with friends in town after a late meeting about a possible apprenticeship. "The house is too quiet," Victoria observed as they prepared dinner together in the kitchen that had seen so many family meals. "They will all be back soon enough, making noise and demanding food," Samuel said with a laugh. "Enjoy the peace while it lasts." Victoria moved close to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Do you remember what I said on our wedding night, about how you gave me a reason to want to live again?" "I remember everything about our wedding night," Samuel said with a grin that made Victoria blush, even after all these years. "Well, I want you to know that every day since then has only reinforced that feeling. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible. A home, a family, a purpose, and most importantly, a love that has sustained me through everything. I could not imagine my life without you, Samuel Quinn." Samuel pulled her closer, looking into eyes that were still as green and captivating as they had been that day in the canyon. "You are my heart, Victoria. Everything good in my life flows from you. I was just a drifter before I found you, but you made me into the man I am today. A husband, a father, a member of a community. You gave me all of that." They stood together in their kitchen, holding each other as the sun set outside the window, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a scene they had repeated countless times over the years, but it never lost its significance. Every embrace, every kiss, every quiet moment together was a celebration of the journey they had taken, of the obstacles they had overcome, of the love that had sustained them through it all. The following year brought a new joy to their lives when Thomas married a sweet young woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was a grand affair, and Samuel and Victoria watched with pride as their oldest son exchanged vows with his bride. It reminded them both of their own wedding, of the promises they had made to each other in this very church. 2 years later, Rose married a teacher she had met at college, a kind man named James who shared her passion for education. They settled in San Andreas, where they both taught at the school and began their own family. Matthew eventually decided on the law, apprenticing with the town lawyer before heading to California for proper law school. As Samuel and Victoria entered their 50s, they found themselves at the center of an expanding family. Thomas and Catherine had 3 children in quick succession, making Samuel and Victoria grandparents. Rose and James added 2 more grandchildren to the mix. The Quinn house, which had once seemed so spacious, was once again filled with noise and laughter whenever the family gathered. One Sunday afternoon, in the summer of 1902, the entire extended family gathered for a celebration of Samuel and Victoria's 26th wedding anniversary. The yard was full of children playing, adults talking and laughing, food and drinks spread across tables under the shade of cottonwood trees Samuel had planted years ago. Mrs. Callahan was there too, now in her 80s but still sharp and energetic, regaling the younger generation with stories of back in the day. As the party wound down and people began to leave, Samuel and Victoria found themselves standing on their porch, watching the sun set as they had done countless times before. Their hands were clasped together, fingers intertwined in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the years. "I have been thinking," Samuel said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About that day I found you in the canyon. You said you did not think anyone would come, but I am so grateful that I did come, that I was on that trail at that exact moment." Victoria squeezed his hand. "Do you know what I realized recently? That canyon, that terrible day, it was not the end of my story like I thought it was. It was the beginning. The beginning of us, of this family, of this beautiful life we have built together. Those raiders thought they were destroying everything when they killed my uncle and aunt, And in some ways they did. But from that destruction, something new and beautiful grew. Like a wildflower growing in the desert, Samuel mused, finding life in the harshest conditions. Exactly like that. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that still fit perfectly after all these years. I have been so blessed, Samuel, more blessed than I ever dared to hope for on that day when you found me praying for rescue. Samuel kissed her temple gently. We have been blessed together. Every joy, every challenge, every moment we have shared has been a gift. I would not change a single thing about our journey, Victoria. Not one thing. As they stood together watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, the sounds of their family saying goodbyes and making plans for the next gathering drifting up to them, Samuel and Victoria knew a profound peace. They had built something that would last beyond their own lives, a legacy of love and family that would continue through their children and grandchildren. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Samuel gradually handed over the horse business entirely to Thomas, though he still enjoyed spending time in the stables and working with the younger animals. Victoria reduced her sewing work, taking on only special projects that interested her. They spent more time together, taking long walks, visiting with friends, doting on their grandchildren. They traveled some too, fulfilling Victoria's old dream of seeing the ocean. They journeyed to California, where they spent a week at the coast, walking on the beach and marveling at the vastness of the Pacific. Victoria collected shells and watched the waves with the same wonder she had brought to everything in her life. Samuel mostly watched her, his heart full of gratitude that he could give her this experience. In the fall of 1910, as they celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered once again at the Quinn house. Thomas was now running not just the family business, but serving as a town councilman, as Samuel had done. Rose and James had become pillars of the educational community, their school now one of the best in the territory. Matthew had returned to San Andreas after his law studies and established a thriving practice, also serving occasionally as a circuit judge. The grandchildren ranged from young adults to small children, a boisterous, loving crowd that filled the house with energy. As dinner concluded and people gathered in the parlor for coffee and cake, Thomas called for everyone's attention. "I want to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my parents, Samuel and Victoria Quinn. 34 years ago, they started a journey together, and in doing so, they created all of this." He gestured around the room at the assembled family. "They showed us what true love looks like, what commitment means, what it means to build a life together through good times and hard times. Everything we are, everything we have, flows from the love they share. To Mom and Dad. To Mom and Dad." The room echoed, glasses raised high. Samuel stood, pulling Victoria up with him. "Thank you all for being here, for being the blessing you are to us. Victoria and I could not have imagined when we started this journey that we would end up here, surrounded by so much love. We are grateful every day for each and every one of you." Victoria wiped tears from her eyes. "You are all our greatest achievement, our greatest joy. The life we have lived, the family we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. I love you all so much." As the evening continued, Samuel found a moment to pull Victoria aside onto the porch, away from the noise and celebration inside. The November air was crisp, and he draped his coat around her shoulders. They stood looking out at the town spread before them, lights twinkling in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. "You remember the very first time we stood on this porch?" Samuel asked. "On our wedding night." "How could I forget?" Victoria smiled. "You carried me over the threshold and we stood right here looking at our new home, our new life together." "I was so nervous," Samuel admitted. "So afraid I would not be able to give you the life you deserved." "Oh, Samuel, you gave me everything and more. You gave me love, security, family, purpose. You gave me a reason to live when I thought my life was over. You showed me that even from the darkest moments, beautiful things can grow." Samuel pulled her close, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms as they had done so many times over the years. The sounds of their family drifted out from inside. Children laughing, adults talking, the warmth of love and connection that filled their home. "I love you, Victoria Quinn," Samuel said. "I have loved you from that moment in the canyon when you said you did not think anyone would come. I loved you for your courage, for your strength, for your hope even in the darkest hour. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Samuel, always and forever." They kissed there on the porch, a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their long years together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, their eyes bright with happy tears. The party continued late into the night, and when everyone finally left, Samuel and Victoria cleaned up together, moving around each other with the practiced ease of decades of partnership. As they prepared for bed, Victoria paused in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. "We are getting old," she observed. Her auburn hair was now streaked with silver, and lines marked her face, though Samuel still found her as beautiful as the day he met her. "We are getting old together," Samuel corrected, coming to stand behind her, his hands on her shoulders. "And I would not have it any other way. Every gray hair, every line, they are marks of the life we have lived, the experiences we have shared. You are beautiful, Victoria. You always have been, and you always will be to me." Victoria reached up to cover his hands with hers, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "How did I get so lucky, finding you when I had lost everything else?" "I think we found each other exactly when we were meant to," Samuel said. "And we made our own luck from there through hard work, love, and faith." They went to bed that night as they had for thousands of nights before, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating in synchrony, their souls intertwined in a way that time and age could not diminish. The years that followed were peaceful and full. Samuel and Victoria watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated more weddings, welcomed great-grandchildren into the world. San Andreas continued to grow around them, evolving from a frontier town into a proper city. But they remained at its heart, respected elders whose love story had become legend in the community. People would sometimes ask Victoria about that day in the canyon, about what she had thought when Samuel found her. She always smiled and said the same thing. "I thought I was praying for rescue, but God sent me so much more than that. He sent me home." In the spring of 1918, as they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary, Samuel and Victoria took one more trip out to the canyon where they had met. It was harder to make the journey now. They were both in their mid-60s, and the ride was long. But it felt important to return to where it all began. The canyon was unchanged, eternal and indifferent to human dramas. They found the place where the graves had been, though the markers Samuel had made all those years ago had long since weathered away. Victoria stood quietly for a moment, remembering her uncle and aunt, the fear and desperation she had felt. "I hope they know," she said softly. "I hope somehow they know that I survived, that I thrived, that I found happiness beyond what they ever could have wished for me." "I believe they know," Samuel said. "I believe they would be proud of the woman you have become, of the life you have built." They placed fresh flowers on the site, said a prayer, and then walked together to the spot where Samuel had first heard Victoria praying. They stood there, hands clasped, remembering that pivotal moment that had changed both their lives forever. "Thank you," Victoria said, turning to Samuel. "Thank you for coming when I did not think anyone would. Thank you for giving me a second chance at life, at love, at everything." Samuel cupped her face in his weathered hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "Thank you for letting me find you, for letting me love you, for building this beautiful life with me. You are and always will be my greatest blessing, Victoria." They kissed there in the canyon, a tender, loving kiss that spoke of decades of devotion and partnership. When they pulled apart, both were crying, but they were happy tears, grateful tears for the journey they had shared. As they rode back toward San Andreas, Victoria looked back once at the canyon. "Goodbye," she whispered. "Thank you for being the place where my life truly began." Samuel reached over and took her hand as they rode. "Let us go home," he said, "to the life we built together." They rode toward the setting sun, toward the town that had become their home, toward the family that awaited them. Behind them, the canyon stood silent and eternal, a witness to the beginning of a love story that would endure through all the years to come, a testament to the power of hope, faith, and the human capacity for love even in the darkest of times. When they finally passed away, many years later, first Samuel at the age of 78, and Victoria just 2 years later at 76, they were buried side by side in the San Andreas Cemetery, their headstones bearing simple inscriptions. Samuel's read, "Beloved husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, he answered a prayer." Victoria's read, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandfather, her prayers were answered." Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered for the funerals, each carrying forward the legacy of love and family that Samuel and Victoria had established. The story of how they met, of the cowboy who found a woman praying for rescue in a canyon, became part of family lore, passed down through generations. The house they built still stood, lived in now by Thomas's grandson, filled with another generation of children and love. The horse business continued to thrive under the family's management. Rose's descendants continued the tradition of education, several becoming teachers themselves. Matthew's legal legacy lived on through 2 of his grandchildren who became lawyers. But more than any material legacy, what Samuel and Victoria left behind was the example of their love. They had shown their family and their community what it meant to build a life together through commitment, faith, and enduring love. They had proven that even from the darkest moments, from loss and fear and desperation, beautiful things could grow. Their story became a reminder that rescue comes in many forms, that prayers are answered in unexpected ways, and that love, when nurtured and cherished, can create a legacy that endures long after we are gone. In the end, Victoria had been right all those years ago on their anniversary. The canyon had not been the end of her story but the beginning. And what a beautiful beginning it had been, leading to a life full of love, family, purpose, and joy. Samuel had found Victoria praying for rescue, but in saving her, he had also saved himself, finding his own purpose and meaning in their love. Their story, that of the cowboy and the woman in the canyon, lived on, a testament to hope, to faith, and to the transformative power of love that can turn even the darkest moment into the beginning of something beautiful and enduring.